Commercial banks raised 2.5 trillion naira in first half of 2025. Nigeria's economy expands windows for foreign direct investment inflows. Federal government charges oil firms on corporate social responsibilities, pledges fairness in host community disputes. Oil holds gains as investors eye impact from attacks on Russian energy facilities. Asian markets fluctuate ahead of expected U.S. rate cut. The program is Business Express, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Musa Abubakar, your guide. Let's now bring you up to speed with business development. The commercial banks are seeking new capital under the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, recapitalization directive raised 2.5 trillion naira in the first half of this year. It is 28th Nigeria Banking Sector Report 2025 entitled Act Bold Beyond a $1 Trillion Economy, released in Lagos. Invest West Africa Limited stated that banks might had raised up to 2.5 trillion naira in the first 6 months of this year. According to the report, monetary policy under the Olayemi Kadoso-led Central Bank of Nigeria showed successive hikes in the benchmark rate by a cumulative of 875 basis points to 27.5% between February 2024 and November 2024, and this, alongside other variables, was left unchanged throughout the first half of this year. It showed that the ongoing recapitalization of the banking industry had shown that several banks initiated or completed a capital raise to strengthen their buffer. Nigeria is beginning to attract renewed investor confidence as reforms and signs of stability reshape its foreign capital narrative. While foreign inflows have long been constrained by FX volatility, policy inconsistency and inflationary pressures, recent trends suggest a gradual alignment of Nigeria's vast market potential with global benchmarks for investment, such as macroeconomic stability, regulatory transparency, and profit repatriation. Nigeria's inflation is expected to extend its slowdown as the MBS prepares to release August data. Analysts project a continued disinflation, with Coronation Merchant Bank forecasting headline inflation at 21.45% year-on-year, down from 21.88% in July and 1.74% month-on-month. The moderation is linked to improved food supply from early harvest of maize, groundnuts, pumpkins, and vegetables, especially in the south and middle belt. However, structural issues like poor storage and bad roads may limit further gains. Some analysts suggest the trend could open door for an interest rate cut at next week's MPC meeting. Now, how much is the naira exchanging for the currencies? Let's see. effective January 1st, 2026, mark a major overhaul of the fiscal system. The reforms through the Nigeria Tax Act, Nigeria Tax Administration Act, and Nigeria Revenue Service Act repeal and consolidate key existing tax laws into a single regime. The goal is to simplify compliance, broaden the tax base, eliminate multiple taxation, and create a clearer, growth-friendly framework for businesses and individuals. Now, to shed light on issues around the new tax law in Nigeria is an associate professor of forensic accounting and the immediate past chairman of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, Abuja District, Dr. Kennedy Iwundu. You're welcome to Business Express.
Thank you for inviting me to the program.
Okay, beautiful. One of the biggest, well, to really talk about, about the new tax law, one of the biggest features of the Nigerian Administration Act is the mandatory tax identification number, who is required. I mean, the question now is, who is required to have a tax ID under the new law?
The person that is required to have a tax ID under the new law is a taxable individual. Okay. A taxable individual is required to have tax ID under a new law. It's not everybody that is taxable. Okay. Students are not taxable. Pensioners are not taxable. And there are so many people that are not taxable, including those who earn minimum wage and below. They are not taxable. So if you fill a form and you're a taxable individual, you're expected to have a tax ID, a taxpayer's identification number.
Okay, how will individuals now and businesses obtain their tax ID? And is it true that the National Identification Number and the Corporate Affairs Commission numbers will now serve this purpose?
Yeah, the tax identification number is created by the Revenue Authority. It is not the Nigerian, all those agencies you are mentioning that are supposed to create tax identification number. The State Internal Revenue Service, for example, the FCT IRS, is supposed to create tax identification number for residents of FCT, and the Federal Revenue Service is supposed to create tax ID for companies, limited liability companies. So those agencies of government, the FIRS and FCT IRS, are expected to create tax IDs, and individuals are expected to visit their offices and provide them with all the necessary requirements for them to create tax identification number.
So is it true that the National Identification Number and the CAC numbers will now serve this purpose?
Yes, when you get to FCT IRS, for example, to create your tax ID with your business name registration, or when you visit FIRS to create tax ID with your limited liability company, the FIRS or FCTRS will ask you to bring certificate of incorporation, bring your address, bring your BVN, bring your name, national identification number, and along with other information they will ask you to bring. With it, they will now create a tax identification number for you. So tax identification number is only created by the Revenue Authority. Either as an individual, you are living in FCT, for example, you walk into the FCT IRS, they are the one that will create it for you. But for companies, it's the Nigeria Revenue Service that is coming, which is currently FIRS, that will create it. However, if you register a company in CAC now, as you are getting that company, the tax ID is already on the certificate of that company. So what you need to do is to go to FIRS to activate it. Because all the new companies registered by CAC already have tax identification number, because CAC is working hand in hand with FIRS. So when you register a new company, it will have a tax ID. So what you need to do, pick up that tax ID at the bottom of that certificate of incorporation, proceed to FIRS for activation.
Okay, what practical changes should Nigerians expect come January 2026 when a tax ID becomes compulsory for opening bank accounts or accessing financial services?
Yeah, the tax ID is very, very important because the new law is saying that from next year, the banks are expected to report to the Revenue Authority transactions of individuals that are up to 25 million above in a quarter, and also transactions of companies that are up to 100 million above for limited liability companies. So it's expected that if it is well implemented, banks have the duty to report to the revenue authorities quarterly. It's a quarterly report to revenue authorities. If an individual has transacted up to 25 million above, banks are obligated to report to the revenue authority. And if a company has had a transaction of up to 100 million above, banks also have obligation to report to the Federal Revenue, reporting that these companies have operated or have transacted up to 100 million above. The essence is to alert the revenue authority to know that if these individuals or companies, whether they are actually paying their tax, tracking them, especially through their tax identification number.
Now, what happens to individuals or businesses that fail to obtain a tax ID or comply with the new tax rules?
If you are an individual, you're a taxable individual, and you are doing business in Nigeria, you're expected to have your tax identification number. And if you are not having it, I'm sure the bank will not give you the services you require or stop you from transacting with them until you get your tax identification number. But it's not even a new thing. Even before this law came to be, so many people who open bank accounts has always run to us to create a tax identification number that the bank is requiring it. So I'm not seeing it as a new thing, because I know throughout this year and even last year, so many individuals who are going to the bank to register, including cooperative society, including NGOs, they have already run back to us to say, bank need a TIN before they open an account. And we also create it and give them, and they will proceed to the bank to open and operate an account. So for me, it's not a new thing. I don't know why Nigerians are making it to look as if it's new. We've been getting requests from people who go to the bank to say they need a TIN. Bank say get a TIN, and we get TIN for them. So it has been going on. But I don't know why Nigerians are seeing it as if it has not been occurring.
That's why we need to educate them. Now, the Act allows tax authorities to issue tax IDs even without an application. How will this work in practice?
No, if you don't have any tax obligation, you are not expected to have your tax identification number, except you are just having it for having sake. I've given you an example. If you are opening a bank account and it is stated clearly that you are a student, you are opening a bank account in a bank, and when you're filling a form, you state that you're a student. The bank will not mandate that you should get a tax identification number because you're not a taxable person.
But what about if you're a taxable person and you decide not to? What happens?
No, if you are opening a bank account and you fill the form that you're a businessman, you're a taxable person, the bank will require that you open.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Having a tax ID is just like having a BVN. It's like having a name, national identification number. So having a tax ID is not a crime. Any taxable individual in Nigeria should have a tax identification number. I don't see it as a crime. It's just for you to ensure you fulfill all your obligations. And many people who are patriotic already have their tax identification number. So many companies have their tax identification number. So many individuals, especially those under the payee system, they have their tax identification number.
Okay. Before I let you go, Mr. or Dr. Kennedy Iwondo, can tax IDs be suspended or deregistered And under what circumstances?
Yeah, tax ID can be deregistered by the Revenue Authority if it is found to be, not worthy to be used. The Revenue Authority has conditions upon tax ID can be deregistered. For example, if a taxpayer dies and there is a notice that this taxpayer has died, of course the Revenue Authority has a duty to delete or deactivate the tax ID of that individual because that individual is not existing any longer. Are you there?
Okay, yeah.
So the same thing happens to a company. If a company is liquidated today or a company has been winded up, of course, on the notification of the Revenue Authority, they can deregister, they can deactivate, they can delete the tax identification number of that company.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Iwundu.
Thank you very much for having me, and have a wonderful day.
Yeah, you too. Go hold steady as investors await federal rate decision. Let's now take a trip to the commodities market.
Dr. Alhaji Abdulaziz Yari Abubakar, Marafan Sakwato, Shatiman Zamfara, former governor Zamfara State, distinguished senator Zamfara West Senatorial District, and Alhaji Shehu Tahir Malumfashi cordially invite the general public to the wedding fatiha of their son and daughter, Alhaji Abdul Nasir Abdulaziz Yari Abubakar and Safiya Shehu Idris, scheduled to take place as follows. Date, Friday 19th September 2025. Time, 1:30 p.m. Venue, Sultan Bello Jumat Mosque, Kaduna. Please treat this announcement as formal invitation. Come one, come all. Alhaji Mukhtar Yari Abubakar, Kayayim Mafara, announcer.
Now let's move to sustainable development. The federal government has charged all companies to show greater commitment to corporate social responsibility in their host communities, in line with the provisions of the Petroleum Industry Act, PIA. Chairman of the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, Dr. Mohammed Bello stated this during a meeting in Abuja. The meeting, which was a mediation of some oil companies and their host communities in Anambra State, was convened following allegations of neglect by the communities. A statement from the Commission's head of information, Mariam Umar Yusuf, said the Commission is committed to ensuring that oil companies meet their obligations. And after energy oil prices were little change on Monday as investors assess the impact of Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian refineries that could disrupt its crude and fuel exports, while also eyeing U.S. fuel demand growth. Brent crude futures edge up 3 cents to $67.02 a barrel, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude was at $62.77 a barrel, up 8 cents. Both contracts gained more than 1% last week as Ukraine stepped up attacks on Russian oil infrastructure, including the largest oil exporting terminals. The world's biggest oil and gas companies are shifting from aggressive drilling to caution as tumbling crude prices force executives to slash costs and jobs while shelving projects. The move marks the industry's deepest pullback since the market collapse triggered by the coronavirus in 2020, with the players once again bracing for a prolonged downturn. Across the globe, thousands of workers are losing their jobs, investments are being trimmed, and debt levels are climbing back to pre-2022 highs. From the shale fields of Texas to the offices of London and Kuala Lumpur, the message is clear: oil's boom cycle has ended, at least for now. Now, investors exchanged 899.7 billion naira on the exchange last week. Olayenka Ojo now brings us a recap of how the market performed.
Thank you, Musa. The NGX All-Share Index and market capitalization appreciated by 1.18% to close the week at 140,545.69 basis points and 88.922 trillion naira. A total turnover of 3.188 billion shares worth 99.685 billion naira in 132,711 deals were traded last week by investors on the floor of the exchange. The financial services industry led the activity chart with 2.282 billion shares valued at 38.812 billion naira in 57,934 deals. The consumer goods industry followed with 198.393 million shares worth 12.836 billion naira in 17,508 deals, while the third place was the oil and gas industry with a turnover of 186.744 million shares worth 35.173 billion naira in 8,811 deals. Trading in the top three equities, FCMB Groups, Access Holdings and Universal Insurance PLC accounted for 1.249 billion shares worth 14.277 billion naira in 10,359 deals. For exchange-traded products, a total of 186,061 units valued at 20.616 million naira were traded in 369 deals, while a total of 24,228 units of bonds valued at 22.236 million naira were traded in 34 deals. On summary of price changes, 70 equities appreciated in price during the week, 22 equities depreciated in price, while 55.
Now, China's economy weakened further in August as key indicators fell short of expectations. Retail sales grew 3.4% year-on-year, below forecast and slower than July's pace. Industrial output rose 5.2%, the weakest since August 2024, while fixed asset investment slowed sharply to 0.5% from 1.6% earlier in the year, underscoring persistent weak demand and the impact of Beijing's curbs on industrial overcapacity. Now, this edition of Business Express comes to a close, but the story of enterprise never ends. Share your thoughts, your feedback, your big ideas. We are listening. Catch every past episodes on NTA's YouTube channel and join us again on Tuesday at 9:30 a.m. I am Musa Abubakar. Keep writing your success story, one business move at a time.